Hello and welcome to the Astranti Strategic Analysis video for the November 2019 Strategic Case Study on Courier Organization Run. This is part of our pre-scene analysis video series. It also includes 7 videos where we are looking directly at the pre-scene and also the top 10 most likely unseen issues. And as mentioned, the courier and delivery industry is the focus for the latest strategic case study exam. I'm sure this is something that is very familiar to all of you. You've all delivered parcels, you've all received parcels, you have used many online retailers that have integrated delivery services or incorporated into it, but perhaps the actual ins and outs, the logistics behind the industry is something that you are not perhaps aware of. And this is a very, very large organization in this case study. Often the strategic case study is a large public organization, but this is a huge company. It's one of the absolute biggest organizations, most recognizable brands in the entire world. It has over 400,000 employees. So it is an enormous organization and trades in 210 countries across the world. So a much, much bigger company than usually you have in the strategic case study exam. And how we are going to analyze the general theme, or how we're going to analyze this case over the course of this video over the next hour or two, is looking at the rational model. So looking at where the organization is, where it wants to be, and how it is going to get there. And we're going to start that by looking at where the organization ultimately wants to be in. It's useful to look at performance measurement, stakeholders, governance, ethics, and also analyze the missions and values of the organization when we are looking at ultimately what the organization wants to achieve, where it is heading. So the first thing that we are going to look at is the mission and the values of the organization. And this can be analyzed using the Campbell's mission model. And you can see I've got that on the screen for you now. And ultimately what it says, what it suggests is that a mission statement or the general preamble of the organization, what it represents, what its values are, etc., should meet 4 set requirements. And these are the purpose of the organization, the strategy that the organization implements and how it competes, what it stands for, what its values are, and also the policies that people within the organization are expected to follow. We had a few statements in the pre-scene. The vision statement of it was to be the favorite delivery company in the world, and the mission statement related to being a responsible and a sustainable business. So we can look at that and look at the Campbell's mission statement and look at whether or not it has these requirements. So why does it exist? It exists to connect businesses and individuals. That was one of the parts of the mission statement. So we can identify the purpose of the organization from the mission statement. Why does it exist? Who does it exist for? To link businesses and individuals together. And then we can look at what does the organization hope to achieve? What is its long-term aim? Well, it's to be the world's favorite delivery company in the vision statement, and also to be a responsible and sustainable business in the mission statement. So what we can read into that is ultimately to build its position to be the number one, the absolute number one delivery company in the world. So that is its long-term aim. Then we look at the strategy, how the organization competes. It competes by being responsible. It competes by always adhering to what the customer wants, always identifying what the customer wants, and also by competing in the various different segments of the CEP market. So we deal with lots of different customers. We deal in the B2B market, we deal in the B2C market, and we deal in the C2C market by use of our drop and click and send locations. And we also have a range of back office style licensing of software and systems, almost acting like an outsourced mailroom, outsourced delivery company for many individuals outside of our standard business model of delivering packages. So there is a range of things in which the organization does to compete, and it tailors its services. It's got several different services that are tailored to meet the needs of various different clients, whether they are big, whether they are small, whether they want things delivered quickly, whether they want things delivered at a slower pace. They're not willing to pay more for the express delivery. They are willing to have it delivered under non-urgent timeframes. Values, what does the organization stand for? Does it stand for being better, more innovative than the competition? Does it represent itself by being the cheapest, the best value for money? We looked in the value statements for the organization, and 3 things came out: that it sticks to its commitment, so keeping its promises, keeping its commitments, caring about its customers, and caring about its stakeholders. So being a business that cares for everyone, that stands for everyone, is important. And what's also important is, rather than just analyzing literally what has been given to us in the pre-scene, we have to think about how we would use that information, because we're not going to be asked to repeat material from the pre-scene and be asked to analyze specific statements from the pre-scene. It's all a big, comprehensive mass context of information that shapes our answers in the exam. So when we talk about that, we don't need to directly be referencing the key analytical points of the mission statements and the vision statements, but what we do need to do is use that information to shape our answers, so that when we are answering questions in the exam, if there's something that perhaps is profitable but goes against the needs and the wishes of some of our stakeholders, we can then bring up the fact that we are not an organization that does things like this. We are an organization that cares about our stakeholders. It's one of the things we value. So the organization stands for what it values. It values treating everyone well, all its stakeholders well, keeping its promises, and doing what the customer wants. Basically, always ensuring that it delivers on time. And that is how you build a successful delivery company, which of course is what the organization also says in its mission statement about being a responsible and a sustainable organization. It's not going to be very sustainable if it doesn't keep to its commitments. It's not going to be very responsible if it doesn't keep to its commitments. And these are also the policies in which staff members within the organization will need to adhere to. And that's what we mean by the policies. It's the kinds of things that the individuals within the organization need to be aware of, need to be almost drilled into them from day one, so that they are always on the lookout for things that would go against what the company is about, what the company values. So it's a very good long-term aim, something that is just kind of achievable. A mission statement shouldn't be something that you can tangibly say this has been hit or this hasn't been hit. It's supposed to be in a sense, a dangling carrot that you're always moving towards. So some very good aims for the organization here. But of course, it's one thing to have aims. It's another thing to achieve them, and it's another thing to monitor how well you are going with regards to achieving them. Otherwise, like Runn themselves, we wouldn't be fulfilling our commitments. And one of the best and most useful, most universal ways of deciding or not on which performances to look at or how to measure those performances is the balanced scorecard, which is a key part of the CIMA syllabus. And the great thing about the balanced scorecard is it breaks it down into 4 distinct categories. So we're not just analyzing how well we're doing financially or how many innovations we're making or what the customers think. We're thinking about it all. And this is really useful for this particular company because a few big things came out from the pre-scene. And one of them was that the customer is always right or always adhering to the customer. One of them was that the company is very, very innovative and puts a lot of effort into innovation. They were one of the first companies to use, or the first company to use the wheel and spoke system. They were one of the first companies to bring in the digital trackers and all these sorts of things that we think of as the norm for a delivery company these days. So innovation, very important. Also, because of the high staff costs, that staff utilization and was very important, and utilizing the van space, utilizing employees effectively was crucial. And of course, money is always important for a for-profit business. So actually, this is the perfect model for an organization like Runn, because various different things came out under each of these perspectives as key themes throughout the pre-scene: the customer, the operations, the innovation, and the finances. So as you look through the different perspectives, of course, the norm type things you would see under financial perspective. So you've got the profit, the return on investments, the cash flow. We've got just over 3 billion in cash in the bank, which sounds like a lot, but it could do with having some more of that sort of buffer income because of the fact that the trade payables were already nearly 4 billion. So if all those debts fell due, they might struggle to pay them all off. And also, because of the high staff costs, because of the fact that they had over 27 billion in staff costs over the last year. Now, obviously, that's not to say that they are going to have the same 400,000 employees on the same salaries for every single month, but if we, as a rough estimate, divided that by 12, that would be over or nearly $2.5 billion G dollars in salaries every single month that will have to be paid regardless of how successful the business is, regardless of how much we've got waiting to come in trade receivables. That is how much money as an absolute minimum before they do anything else, before they use any petrol, before they use any diesel, before they do any other things with regards to operations. There's already $2.5 billion that's leaving the organization every single month purely in salaries. So negative cash flows need to be considered. Then we look at the internal perspective. So we're looking at getting the most out of the operations, ensuring that operations are as smooth as possible. And ways to look at that could be monitoring the jobs that are completed, comparing the variances or to the original budget. And of course, we saw that we went quite over budget in terms of our costs in the previous year, but that was mainly because we perhaps did not identify that there was going to be so much more express parcels than we initially thought, ensuring that we are successful in our job completion, etc., and that we are making full use of each employee and full use of every van, mapping out the optimum routes. Innovation, very, very important to the organization. Again, one of the company's big critical success factors is the amount of innovation that they have implemented and how important it is for this market, this industry, given the way that it is moving. And of course, the customer is king in the industry that we're in, and the customer always has to have the parcel on time. The customer always has to have their needs met. So looking at the number of customers, number of repeat customers, number of complaints, customer satisfaction, the number of failed deliveries, the number of on-time deliveries, etc., is very, very important. So the next section relates to governance. I'll briefly give you an overview of the theory of governance before going on to the specific parts related to the case. So essentially, governance is the way in which organizations are directed, administered, and controlled with the aim of ensuring that the organization is run in a way that is right for all stakeholders. So essentially, ensuring that a business is run to benefit the stakeholders and society as a whole. So, sounds very good. And it's worth noting that this is only applicable to UK companies and listed companies at that, companies that trade on the stock exchange. But that's not to say that there aren't things that we can take from this and apply to any organization. It doesn't matter where that organization is based. Just as in our case, it's not based in the UK. And it doesn't even matter if the company isn't listed, because of course it's all about running the business in the best possible way. So just because you don't have to do it doesn't mean that you couldn't gain from it. Let's take a look at some of the few key factors from the Code of Governance. What is considered good governance? And that's having a separate chairman and CEO. Of course, the CEO is head of the organization, and the board is ahead of the CEO. And so the CEO runs the organization on behalf of the board, and then the chairman is the head of the board. So if you had a situation where the same person was the chairman and the CEO, they might be setting themselves targets they know they'll be able to achieve. So they're not pushing the company, trying to get the most out of the company, trying to achieve its potential. The chairman is just setting themselves easy targets that they know they'll be able to achieve so they can get their bonuses. Independent non-executive directors. These are people who are not employed by the organization. They sit on the board to, in a sense, act as the control for the executive directors, to ensure that the executive directors are running the organization in a way that is beneficial for stakeholders and not for themselves. This, of course, it goes some way to removing the issues caused with the agency problem. Now, agency problem is essentially where directors are running the organization on behalf of the shareholders. Now, the shareholders own the company, the directors don't, but the directors are in charge of the company. So the directors perhaps aren't necessarily interested in the long-term viability of the organization. They perhaps are more interested in their short-term gains. So they may leverage long-term sustainability, long-term growth for short successes, small successes, so that they can boost the share price of the organization, so that they can boost the dividends paid out to the shareholders and get their bonuses and move on. And so that's the point of the non-executive directors. Non-executive directors also need to be people who are skilled, knowledgeable, not just any old person. They need to know whether what the executive directors are doing is right or wrong. And they have to be firm as well. There's a tendency for independent NEDs to not rock the boat because they're paid quite a handsome stipend for doing it. It's only a few days a year job. And so a lot of them don't bother doing it, or don't bother sort of standing up, rocking the boat, where of course they have to. That is their job. And one of the main jobs for the NEDs is to sit on the Audit, Nomination and Remuneration Committees. Now, these are 3 different committees that, in a sense, are the essence of what governance is, ensuring that everything is done fairly and ethically. That's the Audit Committee, ensuring that executive directors are not using company funds to fund business trips and golf trips that the shareholders wouldn't approve of. For example, if an executive director is taking a client to Dubai for 2 weeks to discuss a business opportunity on the company's dime in a 5-star hotel, well, it could have just been a couple of hours meeting at the company's office. That would have been enough. Yet they chose to go on holiday for 2 weeks in a 5-star hotel. That's not an effective, efficient, correct use of company money, and that's the kind of thing that the Audit Committee is responsible for stopping. The Nomination Committee are in charge of selecting people to sit on the board, selecting the executive directors. And this is to ensure that the chairman or the CEO doesn't simply bring their son or their daughter or their husband or their wife on board to the company to earn extra money for the family, to give them an opportunity. No, it needs to be someone who is right for the job, someone who is experienced, someone who has knowledge in the industry, and generally someone who is not related to other members of the board, because this, of course, affects their independence, this affects their ability to think, and perhaps increases the chance of them being biased. And remuneration committees as well. This is the committee responsible for deciding the pay on the directors. And this is because directors' pay and the list of directors has to be disclosed to the public, and so of course it's important to come out with a fair level of payment. If the company that you work for is not doing so well, it made X million in losses, and it's got to lay off employees, but then it's also found out that the director had a £40 million bonus this year, which was a 20% increase on last year's. Then people are going to think, well, why? Why is that director getting a bonus, a raise, when the company has done worse this year than it did last year? The company didn't meet any of its targets. It was supposed to be trying to break even this year, and it made millions in losses, yet you've given the director a bigger bonus than you even did last year. That's the kind of thing that will really frustrate the public, turn the public against the organization, turn the shareholders against the organization, turn the other stakeholders, such as the employees, against the organization. And that is what governance tries to overcome. It's also worth pointing out that governance has a risk management focus, particularly with regards to the audit committee. So the audit committee is often in charge of creating things like risk registers and other things like that ensure that risks are being dealt with. Because it's one thing to identify risks, it's another to actively go about mitigating the impact of those risks. And that's one of the values of corporate governance. Financial reporting and control, also very important, ensuring that all the statements are done as per the laws of the particular country in which the organization operates in. Ensuring that directors have all the information they need, because of course they can't really be judged on their decision making if they aren't given the amount of information given. So this system is to ensure that all executive directors are provided with all the information that they need to facilitate good decision making. And with regards to decision making, that all directors are involved in it. And this means even if it means taking, something as simple as a show of hands, just ensuring that everyone is involved. Often, in certain situations, if you've got, say, founders of the company still sitting on the board, the founders are very powerful. Everyone agrees with what the founder says. And that's against governance. The whole point of a board is that there is a consensus amongst a group of people rather than one person making all the decisions. So if that isn't happening, if one person or two people or half the board are far too powerful, then that goes against the point of a board and thus against the point of good corporate governance. And regular meetings with both institutional shareholders and all shareholders at the annual general meeting. Institutional shareholders, of course, being things like your pension schemes and big stakeholders, big shareholders like that. And it's important that we do this because of the fact that they have a lot of money invested within the organization. If they were to take their money out of the organization, it could cause a lot of problems with the market because the share price might drop, as people may be thinking that there's something wrong with the organization or it's on the decline because this major institutional shareholder has decided to take their money out of it. So that is governance from a theoretical perspective. So what does that all mean for Runn when we think about governance? We know that there is a code of governance in place, and it is very important that public companies within G-Land all adhere to corporate governance. There is a potential for an agency problem in this kind of business because of the fact that there are not founders and is a public company. And the company obviously would have been founded years ago, and one of the big things with governance is that if the founders are too powerful, then that can be against corporate governance. Now, we don't have that issue because there aren't any founders here that we know of with major shareholdings. But of course, as a problem with that is that the agency problem can arise. And this occurs where the shareholders are the owners and they're employing the directors to run the organization on behalf of them. And a lot of the times, directors will have incentives based on short-term profit targets. So there is a risk that they will run the organization in a way that allows them to maximize the profit, get their incentives, move on and manage another company. Whereas if you have founders who are still engaged in the organization, they care about it more deeply than as just a job. It's their company. They want to keep it sustainable. And we know that part of our mission statement is to be sustainable. So we've got to ensure the right people are being appointed to the board of directors who are going to make this a sustainable organization. And one of the things that does that is the nomination committee, of which there was none listed in the pre-scene. Now, the three main committees used in the CIMA syllabus are the audit committee, the nomination committee, and the remuneration committee, with the risk committee generally sitting underneath the audit committee, with the audit committee being the people that establish the risk committee. But the risk committee often is not just non-executive directors, it has various different people from all parts of the organization to get a more wider, comprehensive overview of risk within the organization. So it was peculiar that they had a risk committee that was staffed exclusively by non-executive directors, when that is not usually the case for a risk committee, and that they had no nomination committee. And of course, the nomination committee are important to ensuring that the right people are appointed to the board. They do, however, have a balanced number of non-executive directors and an independent chairperson. This helps to check decisions and bring wider experience to the board, which of course is good if the organization is going to run in the interest of all stakeholders, which of course is a key value of ours. So again, linking it all together. But they could do with perhaps appointing one more non-executive directors just for a bit more extra experience, and also to completely balance. And it's quite balanced now, but they've just got one more executive director than non-executive directors once you include the chairperson in the non-executive directors. And to be completely in adherence with the suggestions of the Code of Governance over executive directors and non-executive directors, you should have a 50-50 mix. But there was no talk of meetings with institutional shareholders or annual general meetings. So if they aren't doing that, then that is also a problem. That is a way in which they could improve on the governance here at the board of directors at Runn. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and more importantly, you have found it useful. I'd like to finish by just telling you a few things about the products that we produce here at Astranti and the ones that are part of our course. So these materials can all be purchased as part of the course or purchased individually. So we have our study text. We have 3 study texts for all the objective test exams. So 3 study texts for E1, P1, F2, F3, etc. But we also have the study text specifically for the case study exams, split into 2 parts. The first is about how to approach the exam, how to analyze the information, how to plan your answers, how to write your answers, and also the second part, which looks at the key theories from the objective test levels that are relevant to the particular case study. So if you are looking at P2, F2, E2 for the management exam, F3, P3, E3 for the strategic case study exam, and so on. We have our course videos, which look at how to plan your answers, how to manage your time effectively. These are the key reasons why people fail the exam. We have our pre-scene analysis, which looks at the pre-scene in a lot of depth, applies key information to that, and also concludes with the strategic analysis, where we look at the various different models in the CIMA syllabus and apply them to the case, and also the top 10 most likely issues to arise in your exam. Generally, we have a 70 to 80% accuracy rate on our top 10 issues. Our industry pack, which details in great depth the history and the current contemporary issues within the particular industry that the pre-scene is based on. We also have 20 to 25 industry examples that you can use within your answers. We have mock exams that can be purchased with or without marking and feedback, where you can get some real exam practice in, look for the kinds of things that the examiner is going to bring up in the exam, and also get marking and feedback from expert markers who have marked for CIMA and for us for many years, who know exactly the kind of things that the examiner is looking for, exactly the kinds of mistakes that students often make, and can provide lots of detailed feedback to ensure that you improve on your performance. We also have our master classes, which are 2 day-long classes which look at all the key issues facing students in the exam. We will also go through live planning, showing you how to plan your answers effectively, how to write your answers effectively. Again, key things that cause people to fail the strategic case study exam, or any of the case study exams for that matter. And also, if you do sign up for our course, provided that you have filled out your forms, provided that you have submitted your mocks, provided you have done everything to show that you have really given it your all to try and pass this exam, we also offer a pass guarantee, giving a free resit to anyone who fails the exam.